In a small, unassuming town nestled between mountains and dense forests, there stood an antique shop known to the locals as Wright's Curiosities. The shop was a dusty, dimly lit place filled with strange oddities, vintage radios that crackled with voices from the past, mirrors that seemed to shimmer when no one was looking, and clocks, endless clocks, each ticking in a rhythm that seemed slightly off. Among all these strange artifacts, there was one item that drew particular attention: a clock. Unlike the other timepieces, it was beautifully crafted, a deep mahogany frame with silver inlays. Its hands were delicate, but precise. The clock didn't just measure time, it seemed to bend it. People who stared at it too long swore they felt the world slow, like time itself was being stretched thin. One afternoon, a man named Daniel, a successful but stressed-out architect, wandered into Wright's Curiosities. His life had become a blur of deadlines and pressure. Work had consumed him, leaving little room for anything else. He felt like time was slipping away, and yet, he was always running out of it. He needed to escape. And that's when the clock caught his eye. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with a sharp gaze, noticed Daniel's interest. He shuffled over, a knowing smile on his face. "It's a special piece," the shopkeeper said, his voice soft but firm. "It's not just a clock. It's a moment in time." Daniel raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "A moment in time? What does that even mean?" The shopkeeper's smile widened. "It means it can offer you the one thing you crave, control over time itself. But be careful. Time is more fragile than you think." Curiosity piqued, Daniel purchased the clock and took it home. That night, he placed it in his study and sat down, staring at the delicate hands as they ticked away. He could feel it, this subtle pull, this sensation of time shifting. He wasn't sure how to explain it, but it felt like the minutes were no longer just passing by. They were waiting. Suddenly, the clock stopped. Completely still. The second hand, which had been in motion for as long as Daniel could remember, remained frozen. He stared at it in confusion. The room grew eerily quiet, almost too quiet. He reached out and touched the clock, and as his fingers brushed the surface, everything around him went dark. When the lights flickered back on, Daniel found himself sitting at his desk, but everything felt different. He glanced around. The date on the calendar was wrong. The year was wrong. He wasn't sure what was happening, but a deep unease settled in his chest. His phone rang, and Daniel answered it without thinking. It was his boss. "Daniel, we need the plans for the new building by tomorrow morning. Don't make me remind you again." The call ended abruptly, leaving Daniel in a state of panic. He had no memory of being asked for plans. And yet, his mind raced with the feeling that he had somehow forgotten an important task. His thoughts were clouded. When he stood up to stretch, he froze. His reflection in the mirror wasn't his own. It was a younger version of himself, a version that hadn't yet been buried in deadlines and stress. Before he could process what he was seeing, the doorbell rang. Daniel opened it to find a woman standing on his doorstep, holding a bouquet of flowers. She looked familiar, but he couldn't place her. "You forgot," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "You forgot our anniversary." His mind raced. Anniversary? He didn't remember ever being married, let alone having an anniversary. But as he stared into her eyes, a sinking feeling told him this was real. The woman spoke again, almost pleading. "Please, you need to come back. You've been gone too long." Without thinking, Daniel stepped outside, unsure of what was happening. But as he crossed the threshold of his house, he found himself standing in front of a different version of his home, one that looked old, dilapidated, and empty. Confused, he turned back, only to find the door had disappeared. In its place, a vast, swirling void. No path. No way back. And then, as if it had been waiting for him, the clock from the shop appeared before him, floating in the air. Its hands were moving again, faster than before, its ticking growing louder and louder in his ears. Daniel reached out, desperate to stop it, but as his fingers brushed against the clock, everything around him began to collapse. His life, his choices, his time, fractured into a million pieces, scattered and unrecognizable. He was falling. And then, as if the universe had pressed rewind, Daniel found himself back in his study, sitting before the clock, his hand still stretched out. The clock had stopped again. The room was quiet, too quiet. But now, he understood. He wasn't in control of time. Time was in control of him. And it was never going to stop. The clock struck midnight. The ticking began again. And as the seconds passed, Daniel realized there was no escaping it. There never was. Time, once a linear path, had folded in on itself, trapping him in an endless loop. Forever.